Hey folks, my name's James. It's November 16th. I'm the president of the Edmonton local of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. It sure is a beautiful day out here. We need to talk a little bit about the Eclipse system today. So the Eclipse system has been in use for the better part of a decade in the cities, but now they want to bring it out to other offices. Specifically Camrose, Wetaskiwin, and Fort Saskatchewan. So, for those of you who don't know what the Eclipse system is, it's an automated phone call system. And this is specifically for temps. So, if there's an assignment for a temp, they will receive a phone call and then they will go through the automated system about selecting what job they want. It gets a little more complicated from here. So, let's start with the easiest one. Long-term calls. So for some reason, the temp needs to come in for an assignment that is greater than 5 days, so the corporation knows that it's greater than 5 days. You'll receive a phone call probably Wednesday evening, afternoon, and you will select the assignment. From the first phone call, you will have 10 minutes of exclusive time to make your selection. If you miss the first phone call, there is a callback number. Again, the 10 minutes still applies. They will call you a second time at 5 minutes. And then, of course, once the 10 minutes is up, they will move on to the next candidate. Fairly simple. Now, for daily calls, which is much more likely to occur, you will receive a phone call. A 1-minute timer will start. Whether you call back or if you just receive the call, you'll have 1 minute of exclusive access to the phone calls. This probably won't be a big deal in the smaller centers, like Fort Saskatchewan, Camrose, and Wetaskiwin. But you have a very limited time, and at the end of that minute, you can still be on the phone. It will then start calling the next person. So, you could be a minute and a half into your call, make a selection, and then it turns out that the next person has already made that selection, so that job is no longer available for you. So you got to be on the ball. We've actually asked for them to extend the time in the smaller markets because, like, Wetaskiwin has 3 temps. Why do they need to get the phone calls done in 3 minutes? I don't know. But hopefully we can make that happen, but that was just part of the consultation. So, now we're on to just calls that come in from the day-to-day basis, calls that are made. You'll just receive them. This makes more sense when you think that if they were to call you in and you do not answer the phone, they just immediately move to the next person in the line. So you can always call back. You can call back as long as you want. The assignment may not be there, however. So daily calls, the expectation is half an hour to an hour or within reason for you to arrive after selecting the call. So that's kind of the easy part. So a quick recap. Long-term calls will come probably on Wednesday evening. There will be a set day, probably Wednesday evening, probably in the afternoon to the early evening, and you will have 10 minutes. Daily calls will come probably in the afternoon and into the early evening, and you will have 1 minute of exclusive access until they start calling other people, and calls on the day are just calls on the day. Now let's get to the interesting part. The automated system keeps track of how often you take a selection. And the collective agreement says that you need to take a reasonable amount of calls. The corporation bases this off of a peer value. So if all of your peers are taking all of the assignments and you're only taking 75% of them, they may tell you that that's not good enough, and they may threaten to terminate your employment. We disagree with this for a number of reasons. I'll get to those in a second. But if you do not meet the call expectation in a 2-month period, you will get a letter. This letter currently doesn't have anybody to contact on it, so you don't know who to talk to, who to speak with. But if you get one of those letters, I recommend you call the hall. If you get 3 of those letters The last one will be a termination notice. You need to grieve that every single time. We're winning it. The arbitrator has determined that they need to have meetings about these. They need to summon you for a meeting to discuss the terms, which they've not been doing. And a reasonable amount of calls is reasonable to you, not reasonable to the entire area. Or not reasonable to you, but it's a reasonable, depending on your life situation. And of course, even though we've won this and we have a formal decision, we even have a judicial review that was started by the corporation that they lost. The corporation has just decided to find the national process, which is a violation of the contract and violation of the arbitrator's decision. So you need to grieve that all the time. Ultimately, most of you shouldn't be getting letters. We'll probably be accepting calls at a reasonable rate anyway, but just be aware that that's the thing. Part of why we think it's not fair is because if you're fairly high seniority, you're going to get every call. And if you accept half of those calls, then is that reasonable? Well, apparently if the next person is taking more calls than that, then it's not. But when you're high seniority, you're going to be getting a lot of calls. And when you're low seniority, you're not going to be getting very many. So when you're very low seniority, you're probably going to take all the calls you can. But when you're high seniority, maybe that's not the case, right? Maybe you have preferred shifts. Maybe you have childcare needs. Maybe you have, maybe you're not feeling well that day. There's a number of different reasons. So we want you to fight those anytime you get. Now the employer says that there is a job aid, which will basically be a piece of paper. It'll give you instructions on how the system works. I've never seen one. I was around when the call-in system, when the Eclipse system started. I've never received a job aid. When we asked them questions about who to communicate with if they have problems, they said your team lead who would already know what to do. All the team leads in Edmonton basically say, I don't know how it works. Don't ask me. So, and the reality is that this consultation was very informative for me. So it's probably informative for you. Our temp committee is starting up. One of our brothers has decided he wants to take that on. So we're starting that up. There'll be a meeting on Thursday to set up the chair. It is an open committee, so even if you're not an elected member, you're allowed to sit and participate in those meetings. So Thursday, 7 p.m. You can find it on our website. That's cupw730.ca. So don't forget to sign up for that meeting. All right? You have a great day.